Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's episode, we welcome Matt.kerhin to the show. Matt is a tech ed teacher at Hartford Union High School in Wisconsin and has been teaching automotive for a long time now. We're going to cover a variety of different topics related to education and the industry as a whole. Matt, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jay. Great to be here. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you. We've had several conversations over the years, and it's been fun to follow not only your progress, but the progress of the school. And I think you've got interesting perspectives on a lot of things as it relates to the industry and how they work with education. And we'll get into a lot of that. But like we do with all guests, I want to start with your background. I've got one question for you right off the bat. Where are you from?
I'm from West Allis, which is just outside of Milwaukee in Wisconsin, and grew up there, since I was little. And then it's funny, I went off to the military. I was a technician in the Air Force, and when I came back to West Allis, wound up teaching in West Allis, and my parents had gone to school in West Allis, and my grandparents actually had gone to school there too. So I'd been there a long time, and then just 2 years ago, wound up moving out to Hartford Union High School, which is just a bigger program, just really just bigger opportunities for my kids to take tech ed style classes. We have 9 teachers out there and 27 different tech ed classes that they can choose from. So it's a powerhouse opportunity for them.
I think the really cool part about that is you're right. The tech ed program is strong there. And I don't know, as you look across the nation, that there's obviously a struggle for getting stronger tech ed programs. And what you've gone to at Hartford is awesome. I mean, we could use more schools like Hartford and everything that you guys are doing there.
Yeah, it's a challenge that communities, want programs like that, but it's expensive, and to be able to convince, your administration that you need an entire wing of a building for what we have, and now we're wanting to add on a referendum to add more, because in our area it's largely manufacturing. We have a lot of, we don't have nearly as much auto in our area for dealerships and independent shops as when I was down closer to Milwaukee, but there's tons of manufacturing from the standpoint of CNC machining, welding, fabrication, all these other things that are really probably a bigger part of our program than automotive. And our automotive program there is bigger than what I had left, but it's just that we have so many other programs. Construction too. Our construction kids for Skills USA won first in the nation last year, and now this year they're going to nationals again. So it's kind of like before I was a big fish in a small pond, which Milwaukee isn't a small pond, I guess, compared to being out in the sticks where I am now. But it's just such a big department, and has some really powerhouse teachers. Which I guess my biggest worry out there is, man, what happens when these guys ever retire? Because we have some great talent, and that's a huge part of our problem, as we'll talk about today, is finding these people that are talented and are willing to come in for what we're being paid with the education that they're demanding.
Why don't we dive right into the weeds then, right there? Because I think that's a great jumping off point, in that we do struggle as an industry, and not only our industry, all of the trades are struggling with teacher shortages at the high school level. And what we see, and anybody that's listened to our content has probably heard me say this a million times, but we see a common thread here where you'll see a teacher retire, and a lot of times those very tenured tech ed teachers have a really good following with the students and have a really good rapport with students, and that person might retire. It's really, really hard to find their replacement. And what happens is that the interest in the program kind of wanes because there isn't a teacher visible to be able to really have visibility to those students.
And even when there's a new guy, then attention in that program wanes because they had a tie to that teacher. A lot of times kids are signing up for a program because of a teacher. Sometimes not necessarily the class. It's different.
Boy, is that true. Especially if it's an elective class, right? Like if it's an elective class, it is a lot of, how much they like the teacher. And then when that teacher goes, and like you said, maybe it's a new teacher, or maybe they can't find a teacher, the interest in that program starts to go down, and then it just becomes a really expensive program that not a lot of people have interest in. And
they don't want to pay for it anymore, right? Because there's not enrollment.
They don't want to pay for it anymore, right? And so then administration looks like heroes when they cut a program because of that. You're saving a lot of cost, and I think at some level that's their responsibility to a taxpayer, is to say, hey, we're doing what's in the best interest of our community and in developing these young people. But there's so much that goes behind that, and that I think is where you and I are very much on the same page of, we need industry to be involved in these schools, because if we don't, that can quickly happen, and that program can be shoved aside and become a lesser program, or maybe even get cut. And I think that's a huge concern. And so when you said that right off the bat, that you're worried about your own aging teachers and their replacements, it's a real challenge that schools have. And kind of to follow up to that point with what you were talking about, is that, if the pay isn't competitive, or maybe there's not such an overwhelming benefit that it's hard to pull them out of the field, especially people with a technical background, you can find yourself in a pretty bad place.
Yeah. It's definitely what I experienced when I left. I feel like I spent 12 years in West Dallas at West Dallas Central, and I had basically taken that program over from a teacher that I had that had been there 30 years. And there was one guy in between as he left that we couldn't get anybody, and we had a guy that was an alternative license that was there for 2 or 3 years, and then he left. And at the time, I had just gotten done with college. I had a tech ed degree that I'd finished at EW Stout, which University of Wisconsin Stout and UW Platteville are the two main colleges in our state that make tech ed teachers. Mainly, it's been Stout. And we started off, there's another issue, like we started off with like 120 people in my first kind of classes, my first year. We'd sit in like, tech ed 120 or something. And we graduated, I think, 12 or 13. And it's like, it's like, this isn't supposed to be Navy SEALs, like it's just a matter of along the way, they're like, this isn't what I thought it would be. Or they find something else that they think they're more interested in, that they don't have to go through all the, I guess, like the paperwork of making curriculum guides and all these other things that go along with teaching, which isn't what they signed up for. These people that usually go into tech ed are not in there to like, do grading and like want to make curriculum and want to like do all the things that I guess people would normally associate with teaching. They like the hands-on aspects of things that we do. And then when they find out like, wait a minute, that's only sometimes a part of what we do. And it is a challenge. It's hard. I can't tell you like how many people I know that do my job that leave after a while, or they come to this job from something else thinking, oh, I need a vacation from my sucky job, or I'm there all day and working on a Saturday. I'm sick of that. I'll go to teaching. And they come in, and a year or so later, they're like, this is crap. This sucks. I don't want to deal with all the politics of administration and, kids whose parents give me grief, and it used to be, you better watch out or I'm going to tell your parents on you. Now it's, you better watch out or I'm going to tell my parents on you. And the pressure to pass kids that shouldn't pass, that the best lesson you could teach them is that you failed and this is why you failed. And it doesn't mean that you can't do this or that you're a failure, but that you need to redo this and be successful, because what you did wasn't good enough. In an industry where we deal with comebacks and we deal with things that don't always go 100% perfect all the time, you have to learn, like, what do you do in that situation and how can you bounce back from that? And I think that's a challenge that we're taking away from kids when we don't let them see that you have to meet a certain standard. It's just not happening as much as it used to, being held to that high standard consistently. And I think that's a downfall of some of our generation.
Boy, is that such a good point. And in the office here, we just had a conversation this morning, and one of our account managers is a football coach for a local high school team. And we were talking about how they're trying to put more structure into their program, and how they had an example last year where their best player was also the kicker. And so he missed like an extra point in practice or something like that, and took off his helmet, slammed it down. And Steven that works here had basically gone and said, you need to pick up your stuff and go to the locker room. You can't do that. And then the only way we're going to allow you to play again is if you come back and apologize to your teammates, apologize to the coaches. And we had such an in-depth conversation this morning on accountability. And for a young person, I do think we need more of that. And it's not that you're trying to punish the kid for a bad grade or a bad attitude, as much as you're just trying to teach them life lessons that'll help them when they get out into the real world. And I think there are parents that kind of lose their focus there in what you're really trying to train these kids to do. And really it's to be productive adults and adults that are contributing to society. And I think when we go through this and we're just trying to check the box of getting good grades, it's not accomplishing anything.
Yeah. Getting grades, passing them through. How do we look on paper on our school report card? All of those things have become a huge priority. And, what has in turn suffered from that? It's the employees that we're getting. And it's not necessarily the teachers, pushing them through. Teachers in some cases do push them through because they're afraid of the consequences of having too many kids failing. They're afraid of, the repercussions of what parents will say, or, there is that. But I think by and large, it's a system problem. And I definitely saw the difference. Like you said, when I came out kind of to a more suburban area, more affluence, where the standards were higher. Now, we also did not have the socioeconomic advantage in the city that we have out here, for those families. But kids like to be challenged. And nobody wants to play on the lowest level baseball team, when they're growing up. They know it. They know when they are being coddled, and when they're having things done for them, when they're not being challenged, when they're being bailed out. Kids like it when you say, this is hard and it's not going to be easy for you. You can do it, but it won't be given to you. And we believe in you, that you can do this, but you have to do it. And we are not going to do it for you, and we will not accept less. And there's a reason that young men decide they want to go off to be a Marine or be a Navy SEAL. It's certainly not because the chow halls are better than they are in the Air Force. Like when I was in, I have a buddy that actually had like 6 years in the Marines, and he went over and joined the Air Force. He's like, man, you guys got it cushy over there. That's everything is so nice. And I was like, yeah, but people decide to go be Marine infantry because they're proud of what they want to do and accomplish, and they want that challenge. They want it to be something that they had to work for. And I think that's why kids like to do sports and they like to be competitive. And when we take that away, and give those trophies for participation, it all goes out the window. And I think right now we've got a country of young people that have just become used to that happening. And now they're being thrown to the wolves that employers that are like, what is wrong with these people? Like I can't hire them and have them do what the people that they're replacing were doing. It's an epidemic that they need people. They need people, but they also need good people, and they need trainable people and people that are dependable and someone that you can put in front of, Gladys when she comes and buys a new $130,000 Jaguar that doesn't have the neck tattoos and metal stuff all over in the face and scares them off, and doesn't smell bad. I can't tell you the problems that we encounter with hygiene in young men that I don't know, maybe it's because they don't get girlfriends anymore because they don't need them because they have phones, but they're just the basic things that you would expect them to know about not stinking, clipping your fingernails and just societal norms that sometimes they miss.
How do you approach that? I mean, knowing that it's a different demographic.
That's a great question.
And I think, it's funny because quite a few years back, I had sat through a conference where they had put a picture of Time magazine up on the video board, and it said basically, this next generation is lazy. They don't listen. They're entitled. And they're going through all of this. And I think everybody assumed it was baby boomers talking about millennials. And what it was, they took off they had it blacked out, the date. And it was essentially a couple generations ahead of baby boomers talking about the baby boomers. And so I think
like 20s era talking about.
Yeah. So there's always this, I think, perception from the elder generations that look almost just because they're different, right? Like the
Right.
generation gaps are there. There are different interests. I think you're seeing that with Gen Z right now, where, they were just classified as the tool belt generation. And I think there's there are some glaring differences, but there's also, I think in there, one of the things that I've been really encouraged by in working with a lot of schools and students is that there are still some really, really good, talented kids in these classes. And then I think there are some that might be maybe a little rough around the edges and need to be polished up a little bit, but still have the work ethic, still want to learn. And then there are still students that probably just aren't cut out for this industry, and they should probably try something different. And, that I think is why I'm such a big fan of doing job shadows and getting students out into industry, whether it's our industry or any other industry, so that they can actually see what it's like to be there. Because I think when you're, say, in high school, you have a visual or maybe you think something's a certain way. And then when you get in there, you're thinking, you look at it and you're like, okay, this is way different than I actually thought it was. I just, my neighbor down the road does this as a career, and I thought he was pretty cool or she was pretty cool. And that's why I went that direction. So I think I really respect the position that all tech ed teachers are in. And I think it is very challenging because you are handcuffed at times from being able to polish up that student that does have potential, but you can't be too rough on them. Otherwise they're going to get upset. And I think that's what we see in industry,
really,
right?
A lot of people just quit. They just quit. They shut down. When you give them a problem to troubleshoot the way that I guess we did, growing up, like, here's the problem. And like, okay, here's a manual. Let's see if you can figure it out, and sit down, and like the persistence that you had to have, go through a book, or find somebody, call them, track down information. Now it's like they can't find it on Google. They're like, I don't know. You need to take this into a professional. Like, you're supposed to be the professional. Like, what is we're training you for here? Like, yeah, they need to be kind of stepped along the way, like in their lab activities and all these things. There needs to be that clue given them because they give up so quick. That is really one of the biggest challenges, is just getting them to stick with it. And every once in a while, you'll get one or two kids that like they will, and they'll go. You'll see like that's how their mind works. They go through those steps and they don't give up. Maybe they're not always the smartest kid, but that attribute is probably one of the biggest things that employers look for. Like, what will it take to get this job done? And if I don't know, I'm going to find somebody that can tell me. I'm going to find information on, a lookup site, or there's something where I can get clues to be able to test this, verify it, and make sure that goes out a good fix. That is the difference. And I think you're right that there are things they excel at. My son's 14 and he's very smart. He's different than me. I certainly don't imagine he's going to be a technician, but he's very good with computers, really great with, he likes soldering, he likes electrical, he likes kind of building circuit boards, things that way that'll, take him far. But as much as he likes mechanical things, I don't see him going into be any sort of a technician. And yet, if it's something he wants to do and he wants to figure out, he'll figure out places to get that information and figure it out, and he'll stick to it because it's what he wants to do. If it's a matter of like, hey, I need you to do this tomorrow and figure this out and fix this, I'll come back at the end of the day, it's not done, and I'll be like, what happened with this? I know you can do this. He's like, oh no, there wasn't information. I couldn't figure it out. I don't. So it's really a matter of what motivates them, where's their drive.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Wrench. We'd like to take a minute to talk about this week's sponsor, Thermo King. Look out your window. Within minutes of being on the road, you will likely see a Thermo King refrigeration unit on a commercial vehicle. As the worldwide leader in sustainable transport climate control solutions, Thermo King is the heartbeat of the global cold chain. Our technology helps bring fresh food and other perishable items to communities around the world. Technician talent is what keeps such important assets moving. By joining a local Thermo King dealership, you become part of an elite team of technical talent and get to experience working with premium products. Each Thermo King dealership is family-owned and operated, offering a smaller company work environment backed by the training and support of a global industry leader. Thermo King dealers hire the best talent in the industry because we believe the world needs and deserves freshness. Think you have what it takes? We would love to have you join our team. Visit WrenchWay now to see openings in your area.
I think that whole deal, that we talked about before of, how we do attract people to this industry, and like, oh, cars are going to have superchargers and they're all driven by computers, and you're going to be able to do this by plugging in this cool video game and fixing this car. That's a way that we attract people to the industry. But as we all know, it's not that we're plugging in a scan tool and it says, oh, replace this crankshaft position sensor, and the throttle body needs a relearn, and it needs an air filter, and put on a set of wiper blades. So they get that impression sometimes that it's going to be done for them, and it's it's sometimes a false representation of what we do. And at the same time, as we have people that have been doing it a long time, or in some cases just 5-10 years, where they're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I'm getting out of this and doing this instead. Retention has become a problem, in our industry as well as, not being able to get new people in. So a lot of that goes along with it. And as far as like the ability to retain tech ed teachers and people that do my job, I guess, like I was saying, the pay for somebody, at my level, about 10 years in, having gotten a 4-year degree, in addition to having industry experience, ASE certs, having done probably like I did a 2-year night school, program through the technical college, in addition to, what I had learned in the military and what I learned in high school and auto shop. You're generally in that $60,000 to $80,000 a year mark, which for a teacher, a lot of teachers are like, wow, that's great money for a teacher. And when I talk to all my friends that are, the A-level master tech at a dealership and stuff, and like, I gotta get the hell out of this. My back's killing me. These kids are driving me nuts, and I got a long day every day. I'm gonna go to teaching and just teach this instead. And they find out, what the day is actually like, and they also find out what the pay is, and they're like, so I'm still gonna have these long days. I'm gonna have to do grading. I'm gonna have to take like a half of my cut and pay. Like can't do that. So there's challenges in everybody's job. There's things that are good about it, things that are bad about it. And I think that's what kids are doing right now as we get them into this, is they're trying it out. And if we can attract them enough to try it out, there's going to be some that stick with it and some that say, well, my recruiter lied to me, just like it is. And, every kid that goes into basic training, my recruiter lied to me. When really it's just a matter of, we try to attract you in with the good things, but they don't always see all the bad things. And sometimes that experience is what, they need to see if it's what they really want to do long term. We just need to make that experience better, I think, so that they see, yeah, this is good. I love my job. And, give them reasons to stay.
What I really enjoy about that point there is that I think that has been one of our biggest issues in the industry, is that as it started to become a struggle to get people interested in our programs, and specifically to the community colleges, in filling the seats, and there are some absolutely tremendous tech schools out there that do a really, really good job at it, but there are a fair amount that might overpromise what this industry is up front. And I think when the student comes out into the field and starts their first job, and they were told by some type of tech school recruiter that they were going to make $100,000 a year right off the bat, we set them up for such a, I don't know, we just set them up for failure, right? Yeah, disappointment. It's not, because that person then, when they hear that from the recruiter, guess what they're doing? They're going and telling their family and their friends. And when they get out into industry, they've got their chest puffed out, and we wonder why they've got some level of entitlement. Well, some of it is because we told them that, right? And yeah, I get it from all sides.
And they're, the first guy that, they're setting up their toolbox next to, that's been there for 20, 25 years. And he's like, they know where they started, and they know what they had to learn coming in and what they were getting paid coming in. And they look at this young, entitled kid that thinks he knows everything. He's like, buddy, you got a lot to learn, and you can't blame him. At the same time, we can't lose them. So what do we do? And I think the biggest tragedy of all of that is that they come in thinking that, after they came out of a school that sometimes cost them a lot of money to get through. And I think we've done a better job as an industry of supporting scholarships and backing kids coming into dealerships. I know a big thing by us for the diesel dealerships is come work for us for 2 years.
Yes.
Come for 2 years. We'll give you the tools you need. We'll pay for your school. If you just work for us for 2 years, we'll pay for your school along the way. This is a great industry. We're going to show you how the money's good. Stay for a little bit and give us some great work. We'll take care of the school. Make learning your job a priority, and we're going to make you a priority once you're done with school. And we're not going to steal you out of school, because that's been another problem, where the employers are like, oh, you're already in your first month, in diesel, and we just need you now. You just quit school and just come work for us. We'll teach you what you need to know. And the focus, and it can work. You can certainly learn on the job. I mean, everybody knows people that haven't done a lot of school and have learned on the job. But the focus in school, whether it be in our high school programs or in the college programs, is on the student learning the stuff that's being presented, instead of, I need to get this job done. I need you to go do it, and I need it done as quickly as possible and learn what you're doing along the way from this other guy. The focus is on getting a task complete and serving that customer and getting them out the door. But the customer that owns the car is the focus, instead of, the customer that's sitting in that seat in school that needs to get the information to be able to do that job. So that's the difference.
I think, to your earlier point where you talked about your son and how if they don't have that information readily available to them, they'll just move on. And I see that same thing I've got a 7-year-old son, and I try to talk to him about critical thinking a lot and the need to think through a problem. And I already see some of the challenges that we're going to see in that generation, in that they have everything at their fingertips. They have everything at their disposal. And if they don't, they can quickly move on to another thing and get what they need, right? Whether it's through fun and they want to watch a video immediately, or maybe they go to YouTube and they're looking up whatever it is that they want. There's so much instant gratification. And I think that translates to that young person too. And I've talked to a lot of students where I'm like, you've got to be patient a little bit, because even for me as a young person coming into this industry, I was looking for promotions fast, right? And I think there's so many people out there that are looking for that, and they don't take the time to truly perfect their craft, right? They don't take the time to actually learn something and really truly think through a problem. And so in my experience, I've become such a big fan of like Legos, for instance, for my son, because it does make you think through things a little bit. And even though you get instructions, you have to still follow the instructions and you still have to think through things, and they can get pretty complex. And it's one of those things where it's not on a computer, and they are, they're actually working to put something together. And I like doing things like that. Yeah, I like doing things like that, because then it's not so, so much instant gratification. And I think it's hard as a parent right now, because I think, and we say hard, it's probably easier than when we were growing up, but
yeah, it could be, I suppose, right? How would we know?
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much stuff. We were talking about this. I grew up in a small town. I think our rule of thumb was that you just needed to be back home by dark, and you weren't expected to really be at home. You were out playing with your friends and kind of all over town and doing all kinds of fun stuff. And now it's not as much that. So it is, as you talk through generational gaps, I do see those. And I do think there's some level of the employers needing to adapt to the changes in the demographic though too, right? And I think one of the things I've been most proud of our industry about over the years is that you are seeing the better shops and dealerships start to adapt a little bit and maybe have a little bit of a different approach, and maybe be a little bit more communicative. Whereas when I first started off in a shop, it was get back in the shop, do your job, shut up, and get your work done. And it does take a little bit of a different approach now for a lot of these students. And I think it's because of that instant gratification that they've gotten their entire lives.
It absolutely does. And I definitely see that, like the differences between generations. I went to college later in life. I was in the military. I was a mechanic in the Air Force, and then I came back and I worked in construction industry and modeling and cabinets and millwork and furniture and all this different stuff. And I saw like a lot of people that had a hard time doing that, into older age. And I had this money from my GI Bill, and I thought like, oh, I'm gonna apply to school, because I only had a certain amount of time to use it. I was like, I'll apply to school and see if, I don't know, some miracle I'll get in. I never figured I'd go to college. And so I got in, and I went, and I enjoyed it, a lot more, I think, than I expected. And I didn't know if it was going to be the same, just as high school classes or what I had been used to growing up. So when I got there, I really enjoyed it, but it sure was different for me at 26, starting out in college with kids that are 18, 19 years old, just generationally. I mean, obviously having been through the military and having, work days and things, in industry that
Structure.
yeah, like long and like real work. I mean, I didn't think I was even that smart, and I was killing it just because I could organize my time, figure out what I needed to get done, and take care of business. You wind up with extra time. So, but obviously as well, I didn't have to work a part-time job in addition to that because I had my military benefits. So that was helpful to me as well. So just seeing though that difference in what that generation was skilled with as compared to me, I had skills they didn't, but also they were much better on computers. I barely knew how to use Windows, barely knew how to organize my documents file. And now that is, for a kid, I mean, something that, in today's generation, they just all seem to know, right? So it is different. Like my wife's 9 years younger than me, and it certainly makes it difficult sometimes to realize and identify with her generation and what she grew up with being different than what I grew up with. And I see that now with my son and with students in my class, and it's something you have to recognize. And right now, I think a big part of our industry that gets it wrong and loses out on employees with young people is not understanding that their attention span is about 7 seconds. Like, we have hiring events and we have, employers that come to the school and try to attract the kids, and they'll say, oh yeah, come to the dealership and check it out. And you'll get a kid every once in a while like, yeah, I think I want to do this. I'll say, okay, well, we'll call up this guy and set up an appointment and submit your resume and do this. And they're like,
Make it happen.
how much am I going to get paid? And I'm like, well, we're moving people up. So you could make about $15 an hour. He's like, wait, I'm going to have to do interviews and resumes and all this stuff to make $15 an hour when I can get paid $17 an hour to work at Walmart, start in an hour and a half, and just put soup cans on the shelf upside down, and pretend I'm mopping the floor. So they look for the path of least resistance. They're the Chat GPT generation. And, we have a big problem in the shop of kids not wanting to use all data, Identifix, ShopKeep Pro, on demand. Like, they don't want to go to those sources because they're not as familiar with them as they are with Google or YouTube. But when they don't have that, real backed repair information in front of them, when they're just going to like, hey, Bob's Garage on YouTube, and he did it differently than this other guy, and what's the actual, correct procedure to do something, or something gets left out and the job isn't done right, that's when they see like when it goes wrong or something's not working. Like, well, what did it say in repair information? Oh, I didn't look there. I just went to YouTube. Because that's the tool they're used to using. And they don't have the focus time or attention to sit there and read through an article on ShopKeep Pro about how to do this job. And before they do the job, look up the technical service bulletins and make sure that, this isn't just an issue with this one-off model of this car, this subtype, or this particular engine. They just go to YouTube or Google and think they're going to do it. And it's because of that short attention. And so when they're going to that dealer and they're hearing, they got to go through a bunch of steps, and maybe you'll hear back from us in about 2 or 3 weeks. That job doesn't happen very often because they just don't have that attention span. They just figure, oh, I'll just go make pizzas over at Marty's tomorrow instead. I can start tomorrow and I'm not going to have to deal with all that stuff. So streamlining the hiring process to get them in the door, get them excited, and get them started is going to be a big key for getting young people into this industry. Now, I'm not saying you'll necessarily retain them, but that is how you got to get them in the door. Because I'll tell you, I had kids that tell me, oh, I want to be a steam fitter. I want to go in the union. And for 4 months, they're basically waiting to get started, right in the union bench, and they're selected. They're already approved, but they're still waiting to get started. And in the meantime, they're working at a gas station or something like, well, I'm supposed to work, but I'm not starting, and I need money. And I don't know, like, is this ever going to happen? And their patience is so short that, it winds up being, they do wind up calling them back to go work. And in the meantime, he's gone. He joined the Army. He's gone. Or now he's working at some other shop, or he's in construction or doing something else. So they just don't wait around, and they don't like to talk to people, which is a problem for them. Obviously, they don't. Can I just text this customer? I don't want to call someone and talk to a person. It's interesting. I don't know how they go on dates. I don't know. But like, why would I need to go on a date? I can just text her what I want her to know. Which I don't know. I'm sure the girls are as dysfunctional as the boys are. So, but it really is a difference in the way that we operate and what we're used to and our expectations, as opposed to what they think it's going to be and what they're comfortable with. And what do we do about that? Do we sit back and say, well, they're wrong. It shouldn't be this way. And I thought that when I was in the city. I was like, well, that's just my kids at this school in the city. And I move out to the suburbs and I'm like, oh, no, that's everywhere.
All the kids.
Yeah, all the kids. It was a wake-up call to me, thinking like, oh, I'll go out there. The grades will be better. The kids will try harder. Like, they'll turn in homework every day. No, they don't. It's the same everywhere. And it definitely is something they should do. It's not something they're doing. And it doesn't matter, it seems like, who the teacher is or whatever. Like, it just is the way that this generation of people are operating. And I don't know what the solution is to that. But
well, and that is where I think industry can help schools a lot, right? Did you know that WrenchWay offers free solutions to help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors connect with local shops and dealerships? Nearly 700 schools across the country have used WrenchWay to successfully get resources and support for their classrooms, such as tool and equipment donations, advisory committee members, shop tours and guest speakers, and much, much more. It's an easy way to bring education and industry together to promote and improve careers in automotive and diesel. There's no obligation, hidden costs, or fees. WrenchWay will always be free for instructors to use. Visit WrenchWay.com and click on the For Schools link under Solutions to learn more and sign up. Direct link is in the show notes. I think we put a lot of pressure on the teacher themselves to fill a classroom with interested students and students that are engaged. I think where some programs get into trouble is if it's an elective class and students are just taking it to get through school. They have no real interest in this industry. They're just trying to get through school, right? Which honestly, that's probably how I was in high school. Just take the next class so I can get through it. And
teachers call it doing school. You're like,
doing school.
You're not here to learn. You're just here to do school. Like, they don't take.
I think I did a lot of school. I was very much that. I was very much that kid. I wanted to get out of school and go work, and I think when industry gets involved, and they, whether it's getting them in the shop or just being present at a school, to be able to sit down and talk with those students and share with them the importance of critical thinking and taking your time in, even something as simple as picking your job, making sure you're going to a shop that's going to mentor you and that's going to raise you the right way. Just helping them get an understanding and a comfort level with our industry to where we are a realistic option. And even with, hearing about your son loves working with electronics. Well, that's maybe the future of our industry, right? Is going into that. And we're probably still a ways off from just that specialty. You're starting to see more and more specialists, more and more diagnosticians that do get more detailed. I had individual by the name of Pedro de la Torre on the podcast probably a year ago, and he is down to tearing into circuit boards from a diagnostic level and repairing circuit boards within computers on cars. And so I think you're maybe seeing more and more of that awareness that we need to attract that type of person coming in. And I think one of the real struggles that we've got in doing that is you still have to learn the mechanical side of things, and you still have to work on a lube rack to start off with, and you still kind of have to earn your keep and work your way up. And once you do, they can make a very, very good living for themselves. It just takes a little bit of time. And when industry can get involved with a school and really build that rapport, build that trust with a young person, and share with them what it's all about, I think it takes so much pressure off of a school to have to fill seats in a classroom or to get that engagement, because maybe we can help pique that interest of that young person. We can help understand, and really they can help us understand what it is that they're looking for. And it's interesting that you mentioned the part about YouTube, because even for myself now, I find myself going to YouTube all the time. And 10 years ago, I would not have said that, right? And the more and more good content that ends up on YouTube, I think the more helpful it is. Of course, there's a lot of garbage
really
content out there as well.
It's just
And
a
I
matter
think
of being able to differentiate and to be able to use it to supplement the other good knowledge that you should be using. But there is some good stuff there.
Well, and I do think that these training companies are starting to catch on to that too, right? And maybe rather than housing it behind a paywall on their on a website, they're having people subscribe to it on YouTube and being able to find it out there, because they're starting to understand that, YouTube is the spot where pretty much everybody goes now. And so if you can house your really good content out there, you probably have a lot better chance of having visibility, especially to the younger generation.
Sure. And if they get a lot of clicks, then it's a video they get paid for too. So, there are, I know of several people, like shops and stuff, that had started a YouTube channel. I remember there was a small engine one that I had kids using, and guy ran a shop and also made YouTube videos, like with his kids, his older kids. And it turned out to be this big hit, to the point that now he's like, I don't want to run the shop anymore. I was like, we'll just make YouTube videos. We'll make enough money doing that I don't have to deal with customers and deal with all these different problems. I can just focus on that. But I'd imagine people get sick of that too sometimes, and, you're basically putting your life, on TV too. So there's ups and downs, highs and lows with everything, I'm sure. But well, like you said, but YouTube is a great source to get information if you're using it for the powers of good. But we also want to make sure that they're supplementing it with the stuff that makes sure they're doing that job right, and that they're looking at what is a good source and what is not a good source of information. Teaching them that. So. And
that might be an element now, and I don't know if that's a part of your curriculum, but being able to identify, it's really interesting.
So when they do like headlight bulb replacement or taillight replacement, I actually have them look up what's involved with doing that job. And a lot of times, like replacing the headlight bulb might be something that's in an owner's manual, or it might be something they find, easily enough on ShopKeep. But if they don't have that, I tell them find another source of a way that you can find it. A lot of times they'll look on YouTube, and sometimes they'll come back like, man, I thought I was just going to put this bulb in. It was going to take 5 minutes. I got to take the whole bumper cover off. I got to get access through the battery, like all these things. And I was like, well, it's good that you know that coming into it, because what you thought was going to be a 5-minute job in the AutoZone parking lot turns out that it's going to be quite a bit more involved. So it gives them a little bit of a heads up as to what that's going to be too. And, we do that with, the estimator feature in our, our information lookup, software. But at the same time, this gives them a view of what is going to be involved with it. And it's a good way for them to get kind of an experience of what the job will entail. So it's a good tool for them that way. And being able to differentiate, like I said, between sites that are reputable and people that know what they're doing and those that don't is a real skill.
Some of the visual that comes with that is maybe just almost I don't know, an unrealistic expectation that it sets in their head. And the example that you gave me in our pre-meeting that I thought was fascinating is the fact that you have a bunch of kids that want to throw a turbo on a truck, but don't really understand compression and why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah, they want to bolt on parts that are expensive, and they all want to be on Fast and Furious and stuff, and that's they see in commercials, and that's what sells our industry, and it's what sells cars. No kid is excited to do brakes on a 2007 Camry. They all want to work on. I want to be on a new Mustang. I want to be on a new Hellcat, and I want to put a turbo on. I want to do this and customization and everything. The bottom line is they got to know that starting off in this industry, what puts food on the table is those gravy jobs on cars that you're learning on, that you can get confidence on, get out the door with a solid fix for a customer, and builds your knowledge base so you can keep going. And when they're trying to focus their attention on how much boost I'm going to put on my my 2001 Civic that's got 215,000 miles on it, is rusting to death, is worth about $2,000. I'm going to put a $4,000 blower on it. Yeah, and they don't even know what that honestly does. Like, oh, it puts more air in the engine. Okay, how does it affect the compression ratio? They're like, compression ratio? What is that? Like what? They have no idea. You mentioned stoichiometric ratio to a kid, and they're like, dude, just a big blower. Just put a big blower on it. That's all I know. They don't understand the premise. A lot of them come in and they don't understand 4-stroke cycle. Like they don't know like at what stroke the ignition event occurs. Don't know. So
I wonder if that's all that different though. If you look back even to like the 50s when hot rodding became a thing, and I think there were a lot of people even back then that were, if they're trying to drag race their car at night, they're doing some performance upgrades, and you hear right? And you hear about like the early days NASCAR folks that were running moonshine and the stuff that they would do to their cars. And I have to imagine there's a little bit of that, of the fact that they're interested and the fact that they're going to do something. Obviously you'd like it to be with lesser expensive parts because you really want them to understand the system. But I think there is some value in them doing something and then maybe seeing if it doesn't work, or if it what kind of impact it had on your vehicle, right? Because then hopefully that helps them kind of think through a system a little bit more after the fact. And it might not be in the order that we want it in terms of how they're learning that information, but it's almost the same as what we've told generations of young technicians, which is figure it out, learn the hard way. And I think there's some element to where that is good for them to be able to do something, and what might seem stupid to do actually maybe helps them kind of comprehend a system a little bit better.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. That's true, especially like the customization industry and doing things, that are innovative. I think a great thing about a kid working at a dealer or at an independent shop with a tech that's been there like for a long time and seen it all, and this kid's going to ask them like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this in my car. And they're like, do you think about this? Do you think about how it's going to affect this? Usually they figure that out after they buy their first, $2,000 rough country lift kit and put it on their truck and find out all the problems that they're going to run into.
I need a new pitman arm.
Cut off their cats and straight pipe things. Why do I have these check engine lights? Why does this thing run like crap? Because they, in some cases, in a lot of cases, my students think, well, what do these automotive engineers know? Like I obviously, with my sophomore level in high school education, know more than they do, and I can make this thing faster. So yeah, it's sometimes hilarious, to get wind of these conversations. And they just like to sit there on Marketplace and look at deals on trucks and stuff like that while they're in class. But yeah, they sometimes overlook that stuff.
It is funny though, like and I don't know if this is your experience, but growing up, I think some of the most successful technicians, and maybe not even necessarily just technicians, but any skilled tradesman, whether it's a plumber or carpenter, whoever it is, when I look back at when we were kids growing up, they were definitely the kids. The really good ones were the ones that wanted to dive head first, and they were going after it, and they didn't care if they were going to screw up. They just were doing stuff and learning constantly. And I think over time, they started off being fairly reckless with what they were doing, but then as they smarten up and as they get experiences and start stacking those experiences, they became very, very skilled in whatever trade that it was that they went into. And I think there was so much value in them just not being intimidated by something and diving headfirst. And maybe they'll make a mistake, maybe they'll screw something up, but guess what? They're going to learn, and they're going to use that the next time they use it, and they're not going to let it get them down. They're going a million miles a minute and figuring stuff out.
Yeah, that is a great point, that you'll get, kids in these different approaches to doing something that way. And some that are slow starters, some that it's like you just can't get them to start at all. And then you'll get some that I just want to work fast. I just want to dive in and work fast and get it done with. What you don't get a lot is a kid that looks at the problem and says, okay, first thing I need to do is go look up all the information, get as much as I can find out about this problem, start diagnosing from the first step that's listed in the manual, and work my way through, through a flow chart and figure this out the way a technician would. So that's never the approach. So usually it's a matter of they start off either really slow or really fast, and then in the end, they figure out maybe that's the way I should have approached it. Because I look at that way now. When I first started building things or working on things mechanically or anything that way, that's how I started. I just want to get in and take things apart. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what am I taking apart? Like, what am I actually doing? And I think I explain it to kids, like, if your buddy Tommy's mom brought into your shop a car for, squealing brakes. And because they just want to, when we take engines out, when we take things apart, like they want to be, basically a salvage yard employee. And it's like, okay, well, what if she brought this in for this squealing brakes problem, and she came back from work later and she's like, oh, hey, I'm back from work. Did you fix my car? No, we have the whole car apart on the floor out there, though. It's like, what? Like, it's here for squealing brakes. Well, we figured we'd take the whole thing apart, and then we just figure out, at some point what the problem was. When you kind of explain it to them like that, like, do you see how that's not really what we're doing here? We're not just here to take engines out, and we're not here to do this. We'll take engines apart, and you'll see what the parts are and things there. But when you're doing a repair on a customer's car, it's diagnosing where that problem exists, if the problem exists at all, because sometimes the customer does not understand the problem at all and can't convey it in a way that you're going to interpret correctly. So you got to verify that problem first before you then go on to figure out what's causing the problem. And now how am I going to fix or remedy that problem so that I can get it back fixed the right way the first time? I can't tell you how many brake jobs we've got in. It's like, oh yeah, hey, can you do brakes in my car with the kids? And I get it in, and so that the kids will write this up, and we'll have it in there and take everything apart, and like, brakes look pretty good in this car. Why are we doing brakes on this? And the customer brought in your pads and rotors and all this stuff. I'm looking at it, and I was like, what did this teacher or whoever, your mom or dad, whoever owns this car, what did they tell you was wrong with the brakes? They said it needed brakes. I was like, did you ask them what about the brakes was a problem? And like, oh, well, no, they just said it needed brakes. So asking those right questions coming in, because then all of a sudden I'm like, where's the contact info for them? And I'll go make a call, and it's like, hey, said they needed brakes. We're taking a look at it here, and it looks like it's in pretty good shape. What was the complaint on the brakes? I'm like, oh, well, it just hadn't been done in 2 years, so I figured I needed brakes. Or even worse, well, it's making this noise, on the freeway, and it's like it gets, just louder and louder. from the front of this car. And so I figured it needed some brakes. So instead of test driving that car and verifying that problem or checking with the customer, because what it actually needed was wheel bearings, we just replaced the brakes. And that's a bad example of a way to fix that problem. And that's one thing I had to learn as a teacher when we were doing live work, is that the first step in this is verifying what is wrong with this car that's causing a complaint. So yeah, as far as my learning and development and being a teacher, you make big leaps along the way, talking with other teachers and seeing what they're doing in other shops, touring other shops, and learning from people that have done it a long time, just like techs do when they're in the shop, and they're learning from other really great techs. So in my job, that's one thing that I've tried to do, and I really like what I do. I like working on stuff, obviously, but I like working with kids, and I think that's the biggest part if somebody's considering doing this as a job and considering maybe retiring and going into being a teacher, is will you have the patience to deal with the insanity of not only the kids, but your administration that will change usually every 2 or 3 years, your coworkers, and things that you don't expect that you have to adapt to. The grading, the software for education, all these things that I just didn't think about when I started into my job. And hopefully we do get some really great, experienced, knowledgeable techs that want to make that jump over to us. And now with alternative licensure opportunities in a lot of different states and a lot of different school districts, they can do that sometimes. The other guy that I work with was a 15-year Hyundai tech. Guy that he worked with was a 20-year Subaru tech, and now he's teaching at West Dallas Central at my old job. He took over there, and that's great. It is awesome for those kids to get. If that person's priority is teaching kids, that's what's great. If it's just a matter of I don't want to work on cars, if it's just a matter I don't want to work on cars in the shop anymore, and I can't stand my service manager, so I'll go be a teacher, and that'll be easier. It's going to be a rough wake-up call for you.
And I think it does take sometimes. Right. It takes that right mindset in looking for that person that wants to coach and wants to help kids get better and improve. Yeah. And I think you do a phenomenal job at that. Now, as we wrap this thing up, I did want to talk through pet peeves as an instructor, right? And so when I say that, I'm thinking about this, and one of my pet peeves, even though I'm not an instructor, I've sat through a lot of advisory committee meetings over the years, and one of my pet peeves is we sit in the advisory committee meeting, and it always seems to come up of what can we change, or what is industry looking for in our students, and every time it ends up being, well, we could use them, they could get more electrical diagnostic experience at the school level, both high school and tech school. In my mind, when I take a step back, it kind of adds to the point that we talked about earlier, in that I don't know that we're not targeting the issue there. I think when we really take a step back, what we're looking for are critical thinking skills. And so while we're focused on can you do some form of electrical diagnostics, and maybe it's just as simple as can you read a DVOM, can you work with simple electrical tools, I think what we're really craving is them to think through a problem and be able to read a schematic and be able to read a troubleshooting chart and really go through the right steps and know where, know which junction block to go to and how to get there. We really, as an industry, will vaguely state that. And I really wish schools would push industry a little bit more to get more specific right there. So not leaving it so generic and so vague, because over, I don't know, however many hundreds of advisory committee meetings I've been to over the years, that always seems to come up, and it's like, oh yeah, all right, we'll focus more on electrical. And then it's just kind of keeps going and going and going. I'm like, we're missing the point, guys. Like, we got to get to the core of the issue here.
Yeah. The kids, in a lot of cases, I think, come in thinking that, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff on the scan tool, and the scan tool is going to save me, and they think that's electrical. The use of a meter, certainly, the use of a lab scope is to them black magic wizardry. If they can't see it, they don't understand it, especially at first. I can do a lesson with kids that are new, kind of early on in not so much just like the auto fundamentals maintenance class, but like in that service class, the second level class. I can do a lesson with them early on with like the smoke machine and like smoke and exhaust or something, and then they find the exhaust leak. They think it's amazing. Oh, that's the coolest thing ever. I want to bring all my friends' cars in. I want to see if they have exhaust leaks. But they'll never. You won't be able to start a kid off with some electrical experience and using a meter and things. And they're like, oh, I want to bring all my friends' cars in that have electrical problems. I want to fix all of them. We never get that level of interest in working with electrical problems, it seems. It is certainly where we need focus, and it's what we need to do. It's hard to intrigue them with that. And then every once in a while, you'll get a kid that is really good with electrical stuff, and they like that. But he can't diagnose a bad wheel bearing, doesn't understand why the steering rack makes noise. So having a balance of all these different things and being able to introduce a little of it all is really great at the beginning. When the reality of the situation is, and we all know now, that it's all changed. And the guy that rebuilds Mercedes transmissions all day in a specialty environment is not doing alignments on cars. He's not, finding a misfire on a Volkswagen, and doing that job. In a lot of cases, people are specializing more and more. I remember the first time I met Pete Landry, guy's a mobile diagnostician here in Wisconsin, and saw like his van. He just had a Ford Transit Connect, and in the back of this thing had just every factory scan tool you could imagine. And all he does is drive around from shop to shop and find problems on a vehicle that nobody else could figure out, and tell them, this is where your issue is, and this is what you need to fix. And that's how he gets paid. And there are companies, that hire mobile diagnosticians, and that's their specialty. But that was the first time I'd ever heard of something like that. And you can see it more and more now, where you have a car, it's like, oh, I fix this EVAP problem. I got to activate this cylinder, this or this. Well, that function doesn't exist in my scan tool. Well, it exists in the factory scan tool, or you can fix it this other way, but it might not be something I'm familiar with. And I tell kids all the time, the number one person to run away from in this industry is the one that tells you, I know everything about cars. Listen to me. Because I might be able to find out a lot of information about cars, and I might know a lot, but man, there's so much to know. Every day they're making how many more new models, and every year they change. It's really frustrating from that standpoint when you think you know how things work. And it's like, oh, well, this company did this differently. They did it their own way. I think that's how BMW got invented. But it just makes it hard, with what we do. And sometimes that's what we love about, the challenge of working on cars. But
I think that's good.
At the same time, stuff is getting more and more specialized because of it.
I was going to say, I think that's good life advice in general. If somebody comes up and tells you that they know everything, right, you probably want to run. And everything we've talked about today.
There's only really 2 makes and models, right? We don't know everything about that.
It's true. Not even close. Right? I think such a good conversation, so many different topics that I think we probably will have you back on at some point to dive deeper into, because there are a variety of different things that we could talk through, and the positives and negatives of not only the industry, but education as a whole. And your honesty and just openness to talk about this is very, very refreshing. So, I'm a big fan of yours. Appreciate everything you do down in that Milwaukee area, and hope to have you back on again here sometime in the near future.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's always great to talk to you. I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you being part of our, advisory committees and things that WrenchWay has done to help us out. I can tell you this, and I'd like to add this in as well, is that being part of this program, and I was in this like at the very beginning, and
Yeah, you
got
were.
signed up with it, and I didn't really understand really what it was, and I wasn't seeing. They're like, oh, you'll get stuff for your shop out of it, and I didn't like even hear anything about it for about 6-8 months, and what it was, and then it started evolving and came back bigger, and we've gotten donations for our school. We wound up getting a donation of a vehicle from a local dealer. One of our local tech schools is donating a vehicle for us, some equipment, things that were donated. And it's because of that relationship with the dealers that was formed in large part through WrenchWay. So if you happen to be an educator watching this and you are not yet linked up with them, please give Jay a call and see if that's something you can do for your school and your program, because there are people out there that want to help you and want to help your students to build a great program. And I think one huge downfall, if I can speak from my own industry, that we have as teachers is that we don't always do a great job of reaching out to local businesses, especially, and make those contact connections. And it is not just in tech ed, it's in all these different areas of teaching. For some reason, there is this disconnect between governmental public school and the local community and private sector, where they don't communicate and serve each other's needs well in most cases. Obviously, there are some teachers that are fantastic at it, but I would say in most cases, that's a big divide. We talk to parents, we talk to kids, they don't talk to businesses. And those businesses, I have found time and time again, want to help our programs. And WrenchWay is kind of that intermediary that's kind of been there to help with that. So thank you for everything that you guys have done for us.
Well, that means the world to us. We that's what it's all about, and really hearing that definitely warms the heart and really why we do what we do. So thank you for everything. Thank you for being on the podcast, and really truly look forward to doing this next one.
Yeah, let's do it again. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Matt. That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.